Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's Tom. I'm back here again with another video, and you'll notice that I'm looking down. I'm actually looking at my cell phone, my Pixel 2, right? So I'm one of those guys. Anyway, the reason I was looking at my phone is that I was pulling up a web page that I'm basically going to read from. Right, so I want to mess around with a new kind of format for a video on this channel, which is basically going to be me reading and responding to comments on Reddit that I see that I may agree or disagree with, or have some nuance to add to the discussion, or things of that nature, right? So anyway, long story short, yesterday except for one post that I did a long time ago, I popped my Reddit posting cherry for the first time. And, I had used to go onto Reddit to see if anybody had ever had the same question that I had before, and see if there's an answer for it, that kind of stuff. But yesterday, or actually no, it was 2 days ago. 2 days ago, I popped my Reddit posting cherry. So 2 days ago, I had this pretty specific question about video file formats and like what is the best way to format my external hard drive. And I basically wanted to just get like some different people's opinions on what to do, because there's no definitive yes or no answer. There's just like what's best for you. And so things that had already been talked about online didn't really apply to me. So I wanted to hear what other people had to say. So I posted my question onto Reddit. Lo and behold, in like within 30 minutes, I get a response. And then like before the end of that night, there was like freaking 5 responses on there, and I was having a discussion with these people. So that was pretty cool. I appreciated that. And yeah, it ended up helping me. But anyway, long story short, that was my first post on Reddit, and now I'm fucking addicted to this shit. I'm posting on freaking the Donald and stuff. Politics threads and this craziness really. But really what I've been posting on is posting on Reddit. Oh my god, it's a whole rabbit hole that I've just fallen into. But anyway, there's a particular thread that I've been posting on a lot. A particular subreddit called r/Sam Harris. And Sam Harris is like this public intellectual guy who he used to be friends with Christopher Hitchens, and he's like an atheist. He's one of the 4 horsemen, right? So he's all these things, and he has a podcast, which lately he's just been doing these like speaking events and recording them, which is kind of annoying because there's always an audience, and every time somebody says something, everybody applauds, and it's just like, oh, so cringy. And then they do these Q&As, and the questions are bad. And I liked it more when he was just interviewing one person, just one-on-one, and then them just clashing or discussing something. This whole aspect of the audience thing, it kind of, I don't know, it removes sort of the essential pureness of his discussions, which is something that I really liked. But anyway, his discussions with the audiences are still good. I'm going off on a long tangent. He had one podcast recently where he was talking with this guy, I think his name is like Christian Piccolente or something like that, Christian P something, who is a ex-neo-Nazi who now spends his time trying to pull people back from their Nazi ideologies to bring them back to, like regular society, regular non-hateful beliefs. So he was interviewing this guy, Christian Piccolente, who is and I'm butchering his last name. That's not really what it is, but it's close. So he's interviewing this guy who's an ex-Nazi who now wants to try to use his knowledge that he gained from being one of the leaders in the neo-Nazi movement for decades. He wants to use this knowledge that he has to help pull people out of the movement, right? To make them escape their hatred. And his whole thing is that he thinks that the way to go about doing this is through an empathetic approach. So not seeing these people as a other that need to be demonized or shamed, and rather approaching them as somebody who is a person, and maybe they haven't been exposed to non-hateful ideologies like in a positive way. And he's very aware of the fact that there is this recruitment aspect to the Nazi movement where they target the disenfranchised, disconnected, powerless white youths, and use their group as a way to give this person a sense of meaning and control over their life. And he basically says that this is like all just like the strategy that they use to recruit people. So there's a sinister element of recruiting that happens to most neo-Nazis. They're recruited at some point, and they're being pretty much preyed upon by the existing Nazis. So all this leads him to believe, as well as the success that he's had with this method, that the way to approach Nazis is just through empathy rather than through demonizing them or shaming them. And he tells this story about how there was this guy who was a Nazi who really hated Muslims. So he's talking to this guy, and eventually in their email conversation, the guy says that he saw a Muslim praying in the park, and he had this big urge to kick him in the head. And it's like, whoa. So he said, okay, we're talking in person. And then long story short, he found out this guy had never even met a Muslim person in his life. And yet he holds these deep-seated hatreds for them. So what he did was he brought him to a mosque and had him have a conversation with a real Muslim. And at the end of it, they became friends. And it really helped to ameliorate this guy's hatred and sort of make him have less hate and more love in his heart, which, let's be honest, is what we're trying to do here. All right? Because think about it like this. If you punch a Nazi, right, that might feel good. It might feel good to punch a Nazi, but what you're really doing is just lending credence to the idea that Nazis are victims and that they are being like oppressed and all the violence is coming from the left, which is not helpful because it just makes center-leaning people or maybe slightly racist people that wouldn't ever act on it see that the right side is more reasonable, and he thinks that that's bad. So you can't just go and punch a Nazi even though it may feel good. Am I even in focus? You should listen to the podcast. It's free to listen to. I'll put a link to it in the description, or you can just get it on the Apple Podcasts app or whatever, Pocket Cast or Player FM is what I use, whatever one. And but I'll put a link to it to the Sam Harris's website, which has it there. And you can listen to the whole 2-hour thing or whatever. But what I'm going to do is respond to some things that I saw in the comment thread about it. So let's get my cell phone. And I was getting into it with a couple people going back and forth. Okay. I'm going to start with this comment because it's something I thought, literally, makes no sense. And I mentioned this earlier, that the applause, it's just like a bunch of like sycophantic retards that are just like, yay! It's ridiculous. And, the people are trying to make a point, and it's like an applause every 10 seconds, and it's just annoying. Because why are you applauding when somebody makes a fucking point? And somebody has this comment. Sam, someone like Joe Rogan reaches so many more people. Loud applause. Me screaming in the car, "Why are you clapping?" Which is kind of true. It's like, why are you applauding that? You just really like Joe Rogan or what? Like, that has nothing to do with the conversation or anything. Okay. Here. This was a good one. It's at one point they started talking about having pride in your race. Okay, here we go. This is a comment that somebody posted on the thread about the White Power podcast. I thought CP, which is Christian Picolente's initials, okay? So anytime I say CP, that's because this guy was using his initials. It's not something else. But, you know, I'll just say Christian. I thought Christian was a great guest on the whole, and the Q&A was much better than average. But Christian did a bit of overcorrecting in the direction of the fringe left. The bit where he talks about how the U.S. never really came to terms with its past/present racism like many other countries have reminds me of this recent panel with Glenn Laurie and John McWhorter, specifically McWhorter's part starting at 1540. And then he posts a link to a YouTube video. McWhorter also addresses the topic of white guilt/privilege and the religious aspects of it all. Among educated whites, I have never heard someone put it so eloquently as he does here. I think Chris and some of the audience members were guilty of what McWhorter describes as the white problem. The whole episode is amazing if you like that part, by the way. My favorite Glenn Show episode. So that was the original comment. And somebody comments onto that comment. Guilt in your race is as silly as pride. There's no part of understanding history that necessitates either of these. Okay? To which I think is kind of true. Guilt and pride in your race is not necessarily pragmatic, right? It doesn't really have a real use. And it also is just silly because you're taking pride in something you had no control over. Your race is completely arbitrary. You didn't get to pick it, and nobody picked it for you. It's just what you are, right? And that's that. So to me, it seems like pointing that out misses the point, right? So what I said to that was, so the comment is, guilt in your race is as silly as pride. There's no part of understanding history that necessitates either of these. To which I replied, maybe, but the legacy of inequality in America created by the genocide of the Native Americans and the slavery of Africans is still with us. It's ridiculous to assume that since there was a Civil Rights Act in 1964 that atrocities have been mended, not even close. This person says, which is not relevant at all to the topic of guilt or pride. Nonsense to apply it is, which is what this juxtaposition is doing. He said my comment missed the point. But I think his comment missed the point, okay? So we're starting to get to a core disagreement here. So I responded. Maybe not guilt, but amending past atrocities should be at the forefront of American discourse. And I really believe that. So what I mean when I say that is that even if you don't want to have white guilt, right? Which, you know, I think is fine because once again, if you're talking about past atrocities, these are things that maybe your ancestors did in the past that you didn't necessarily do, okay? I'm not saying that there's nobody who is still racist in America. There clearly are still people that are still racist in America. But the point is that you can't tell every white person that they need to walk around carrying white guilt for something that their ancestors may or may not have done. Because it doesn't help anything. Like, a white person feeling guilt doesn't do anything to actually mend the inequality that has been created by these atrocities. It just makes one person feel worse. And, you know, I mean, if you're a utilitarian, that's not good. Maybe if you're a deontologist, there could be some merit to that, but, I'm not going to go too deep into moral philosophy. But my point is that even if you don't have white guilt, there should still be a focus on the legacy of inequality created by slavery, created by Jim Crow, redlining, the disproportionate policing of black communities, the over-sentencing of black people to prison, all these things, right? And these are all statistical, sociological facts, right? They're just anthropological truths that you can study and repeat, and you can just see it. It bears out in the data. All this stuff is true, and it does have a lasting impact. So I'm fine with you not having white guilt, right? I don't have white guilt, but I think that the important thing is to focus on trying to lessen the inequality that was created by these policies from these institutions, right? And the problem that I have with the rhetoric that I've been seeing in places when they're talking about how terrible of a concept white guilt is that they stop it there and say, no, you shouldn't have white guilt because nothing that happened in the past is your fault. But the fact is, and this is what Christian said in the podcast later on, is that he thinks, and I agree with him, that the people who have privilege have a responsibility to try to lessen the inequality between them and those without privilege, okay? And in America, there's no doubt that white people have a specific set of privileges that black people don't have, right? And that's white privilege, right? Because for hundreds of years, they were not slaves. They were never subject to Jim Crow laws. They were never zoned out of gentrifying neighborhoods. They were never over-policed. They were never over-sentenced for the same crimes, right? So this is all stuff that is a unique problem facing the black community. And if you're just going to say white guilt is silly and nobody should have it, and people that take pride in being white or pride in being black or guilt in being white or guilt in being black, that's all crazy, and they stop it there, then what I think that does, all it does is say that everybody's equal, so there's nothing to worry about anymore, right? Like, that's what it sounds like to me when they say guilt or pride should not take into the account, and black pride is as silly as white pride, which is another thing that came up a lot. And to me, I think that's not true, because everything in America, for its entire history, for the entire history of the United States, and even before that, has been centered around making things for white people, or for white men specifically, but really for the white family, at the expense of other people, at the expense of black people, at the expense of Native Americans, right? So these aren't these are zero-sum games. So there's whites getting this huge, massive leg up from the slavery that they had and the inherited wealth that has passed down through the generations from that. And black people have the opposite, where their ancestors were enslaved. And so they don't have as much inherited wealth. And don't get me started on the Native Americans who white America literally genocided. Killed almost all of them. This is something that gets brushed aside a lot. Maybe one paragraph in your high school U.S. history book about the genocide of the Native Americans. Let's keep going through the comments, because this guy says you should listen to the rest of that linked panel. McCorder talks about how the idea of making up for or coming to terms with our past are mostly useful. What would mending for past atrocities account for in your book, and at what point would we decide that the past has been amended for? To which I replied, it would account for helping to eliminate the legacy of inequality in America due to the genocide of the Native Americans and the slavery of blacks. Redlining, inherited wealth, and Jim Crow, among others, all have lasting impacts on the black community. It is the responsibility of those with privilege to try to ameliorate the issues of those without. He never responded to that. You know, we sort of came to an impasse where neither one of us agreed with the other one, and we were talking past each other. But I wanted to briefly touch on one other... Francie, shut up! But I also wanted to... Shh! Enough! I wanted to briefly touch on one other sort of meme that I kept seeing in this thread. I don't have the specific comment at him, but I kept seeing this meme of, if black people are allowed to have pride in being black, why aren't white people allowed to have pride in being white? That seems unfair. And maybe it is. But guess what? Life is not fair, okay? And it's especially not fair if you're a black person who is profiled by police, who's being systematically murdered by the police in this country, and removed from their families and sent to jail. That shit's not fair. Right? So the fact is that one thing white people have that in America that blacks don't have as much of is a ancestry that's easily traceable to specific countries, right? So every white person that you know is, some sort of European, Irish, Italian, German, some mix of these things, Eastern European, and people have pride in that, right? So look at these crazy Irish people on freaking St. Patrick's Day running through the city, getting fucked up, going, "Hey, you Irish, yeah, blah, da, 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 da," right? And they're just getting fucked up and saying, "Oh yeah, Irish. Oh, Irish is the best. If you're not Irish, you're not shit. Ireland, yeah, baby." Woo, running around with flags and shit and four-leaf clovers. How is that not white pride? Nobody cares about it either. How is an Italian, right, that is always like, oh, psh, Italians, we have the best food, right? Spaghetti and meatballs. Chicken parmesan. No other cuisine can even touch Italian cuisine. How is that not white pride? When you compare this to blacks who were forced out of their country and brought on slave ships to America, and just their entire world is just disintegrated, right? And now they're a slave for these people that they don't know, and they're forced to integrate into the culture that enslaved them. So there's not a easy traceable, oh yes, well, I mean, obviously there are black people who know, oh yeah, I'm Nigerian, or I'm Egyptian, or whatever. There's obviously black people that can trace their heritage back to specific countries. And, or yeah, I'm Haitian, and I'm very proud of being Haitian, right? That's a real thing. So that's fine, that's there. But what about the black people whose ancestors' families were torn apart by white Europeans? They were removed from their countries, right? And now that's where their history starts, is being as a slave, right? Because the enslavers don't care to take memorabilia or anything from Africa so that these people can have something as a reminder of their culture, right? So their culture is completely gone. And now that history starts as their slavery begins in America. My point is that for black people to have black pride, they're taking pride in their shared experience that is a very unique shared experience, unlike any other group of people in the world, certainly unlike any group of white people in America, right? Where white people have distinct lineages and cultures that they can take pride in, like their Irish culture, their Italian culture, their German culture, or whatever. Whereas blacks, their culture is, their history is one that is of terrible atrocities committed to them. And they have to come to terms with that, especially as the inequality created by those things has persisted. So if black people want to have pride in being black, that's good, because that helps to lessen the inequality. If black people having pride in being black helps to, empower them to be more on equal footing with white people who already have pride in their specific countries, right? Or their specific nationalities, then I think that's a good thing. But if white people want to have pride in being white, well, A, what is even the point of that? Because really, you're not white, you're like some sort of Euro mix, and that's where you get your pride from. And B, you still have this European ancestry to have pride in, which is something that many black families in America simply do not have. And anyway, yeah, so that's my thing on this whole meme of, well, black people can have pride in their culture. I want to have pride in my culture too. It's like, you don't need to have everything that blacks have, because you have so much that they don't already. It reminds me of the people who say, well, if black people can say the N-word, why can't I say the N-word? It's like, it's not a word that's for you to use. Just like having pride in your race is not necessarily something that is good for a white person to have if the goal is to fix the inequality that's created by a legacy of slavery and genocide.